Hi, I'm Sarah. Today I'm going to read you the story of Camilla, which is titled like this. I returned home early to see my parents packing up my things to help me move into a tiny studio while my brother and his pregnant wife would live in my big house. You don't need that much space, they laughed. I smiled and called the police. Well, let's go. I'm Camilla, 35 years old, and I work as deputy CEO at a sports nutrition company. People always ask me why I'm not married yet, like there's something wrong with me. Truth is, I just don't want a serious relationship right now. My life is pretty good the way it is. My younger brother Jake is 28, and last year he married his girlfriend Sarah. They'd been together for years, so nobody was surprised when they finally tied the knot. I was actually happy for them and gave them $15,000 as a wedding gift. That's not pocket change for me, even with my salary, but Jake's my brother and I wanted to help them start their marriage right. The wedding itself was nice. Sarah looked beautiful in her dress, and Jake couldn't stop grinning. The ceremony was at this little church our family's been going to forever, and the reception was at a hotel downtown. Everything went smooth until the family started their usual nonsense. Camilla, when are you going to settle down? That was my Aunt Linda, right in the middle of the reception. You're the only unmarried one in the whole family now, added Aunt Karen, like I didn't already know that. My mom jumped in too. It's time you heard the sound of little feet in that big house of yours. I smiled and nodded like I always do. Inside, I was praying for strength to get through this without losing it. These people act like being single is some kind of disease. I've got a great job, my own house, and I'm happy. What more do they want? Jake and Sarah moved into a studio apartment that belongs to our parents right after the wedding. It's small but decent, and the best part is they don't pay rent. Our parents basically gave it to them for free. Mom asked me to help with utilities every month, so I've been covering their electric and gas bills too. I don't mind helping family, but sometimes I wonder if they appreciate it. The first few months after the wedding were fine. Sarah seemed nice enough, always polite when we had family dinners at our parents' house. She'd thank me for helping with the bills and ask about my work. I thought we got along pretty well. I worked hard to get where I am. Started working at 16, went to college, then climbed the ladder at my company for 13 years. 3 years ago, I finally made deputy CEO. The salary is good, really good, and 2 years ago I bought my own house. It's big and comfortable, with 4 bedrooms, a nice kitchen, and a backyard. I earned every square foot of it. The house hunting took months. I looked at dozens of places before I found this one. It's in a good neighborhood, close to work, and it's exactly what I wanted. When I signed the papers, I felt like I'd really made it. This was my house, bought with my money, and nobody could take that away from me. I gave my parents a spare key when I first moved in. They helped me move some furniture, and I figured it was normal to let them have a key in case of emergencies. They're my parents, after all, I trusted them completely. Family dinners happen every Sunday at our parents' house. It's been a tradition since Jake and I were kids. We all sit around the same table where we used to eat breakfast before school. Mom makes pot roast or chicken, and we catch up on the week. Usually it's pleasant enough, just normal family stuff. But lately, something's been changing. Sarah's been making little comments during these dinners. Nothing too obvious, just hints here and there. She'll mention how cramped their studio feels, or how nice it must be to have so much space. She never says my name, but everyone knows she's talking about me. It's so unfair, she said last month, cutting her chicken. Single people get these big houses while married couples squeeze into tiny apartments. My parents nodded along like she was making perfect sense. I pretended not to understand what she meant, but I knew exactly what she was doing. She was setting something up, and I didn't like where it was heading. The thing is, I don't think their apartment is that bad. Sure, it's small, but it's free. They're not paying rent or mortgage, just utilities that I help cover. Most couples their age would kill for that kind of deal. But Sarah acts like they're living in some kind of slum. I tried to ignore the comments at first. Family dynamics are complicated, and I didn't want to start drama over nothing. But the hints kept coming, getting less subtle each time. Sarah would sigh when she looked around their apartment, or make comments about how much room I must have for activities in my house. Jake started joining in too. He'd mention how they're thinking about kids someday, and kids need space. He'd look at me when he said it, like I was supposed to offer something. But I worked hard for my house, and I'm not about to feel guilty for having nice things. The worst part is how my parents react to all this. They nod and agree with everything Sarah says. They act like I'm being selfish just by existing in my own house. It's like they forget I'm the one who's been helping them financially for years. I pay for Jake's utilities. I helped with their wedding. I've loaned my parents money when they needed it. But somehow I'm the selfish one because I won't give up the house I worked 13 years to afford. The logic doesn't add up, but nobody seems to care about that. 3 months after those hints started, I noticed something different when I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. Everyone was acting weird. My parents kept exchanging these meaningful looks with Jake and Sarah, like they all shared some big secret. Sarah couldn't stop smiling. Not her usual polite smile, but this huge grin that made her look like she was about to burst with news. And Jake kept touching her stomach in this protective way. I'm not stupid, I knew exactly what was going on. Sarah's pregnant, I thought to myself as I watched them. They're going to announce it at dinner. I was actually happy for them. Jake's always been good with kids, and Sarah seemed like she'd be a decent mom. A baby would be nice for the family. Maybe it would even stop all the comments about my single status, since they'd have other things to focus on. We all sat down at the dinner table like usual. Mom had made her famous pot roast, and the smell filled the whole house. But instead of digging in right away, Jake cleared his throat and asked for everyone's attention. Sarah and I have some news we want to share, he said, reaching for her hand. We're going to have a baby. My parents started crying happy tears, even though they obviously already knew. Mom jumped up to hug Sarah, and Dad shook Jake's hand like he'd just won the lottery. Congratulations, I said, and I meant it, that's wonderful news. But then Mom had to ruin the moment. Well, at least one of my children is giving me grandchildren, she said, looking right at me. I was starting to think I'd never get any. I bit my tongue. This was Jake and Sarah's moment, not the time to start an argument about my life choices. I just smiled and congratulated them again. That's when Sarah turned to me with that sweet smile of hers. Actually, Camilla, I've been talking to Jake and your parents about something important. It's about our living situation. We all agree that our family's housing isn't distributed fairly. I stopped chewing. What do you mean? Jake and my parents were nodding like this made perfect sense. Sarah kept talking, her voice getting more confident. You live alone in that big house with all those empty rooms, she said. Meanwhile, we're crammed into a tiny studio apartment, and soon we'll have a baby who needs their own room. Okay, I said slowly, what does that have to do with me? That's when Mom jumped in. Camilla, you need to act like a real sister. You need to prove your love for your brother and your future nephew. How exactly do I do that? I asked, though I was starting to get a sick feeling in my stomach. You should give your house to Jake and Sarah, Mom said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. They need the space more than you do. I stared at her. Are you serious right now? Completely serious, Dad added. You'd move into the studio apartment where Jake and Sarah live now. We're even willing to make it official. You sign your house over to Jake, and we'll sign the studio over to you. I looked around the table at all of them. They were completely serious. They actually thought this was fair. No, I said, standing up from my chair, absolutely not. I'm not giving up my house. Camilla, Mom said, her voice sharp, don't be so selfish. Selfish? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I worked for 13 years to afford that house. I saved every penny, I earned it. You're just an old maid who'll never get married or have kids anyway, Dad said. What do you need a house like that for? The words hit me like a slap, my own father calling me an old maid. Jake decided to pile on too. "You're being greedy, Camilla," he said. "Family is supposed to help family." "Greedy?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I gave you $15,000 for your wedding. I pay your utilities every month. How exactly am I greedy?" "That's different," Jake said. "No, it's not different," I shot back. "I'm tired of you all acting like I'm the problem. I'm tired of you loving Jake more than me." "That's not true," Mom said, but her voice didn't sound convincing. "Really? Then here's a solution," I said. "Sell your studio apartment. Use that money as a down payment and buy Jake and Sarah a house. Problem solved." My parents looked at each other. "We can't afford a second mortgage," Dad said. "Then live within your means," I said, grabbing my purse. "Don't dream about taking my house just because you don't want to spend your own money." I headed for the door, but they weren't done with me. "Camilla, you're being ridiculous," Mom shouted after me. "Selfish," Dad added. "Greedy," Jake called out. I turned around one last time. "I'm done with this conversation. I'm not giving up my house, and that's final." I left them sitting there and drove home. When I walked into my house, I looked around at everything I'd worked so hard for. The comfortable couch I'd saved months to buy. The kitchen table where I eat breakfast every morning. The bedroom with the big windows that let in perfect morning light. This was my home. I'd earned every square foot of it. And I'd be damned if I was going to hand it over to people who thought I didn't deserve it. They could call me selfish all they wanted. They could say I was greedy or an old maid or whatever else came to mind. But this house was mine, and I was keeping it. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my living room, looking out at my backyard. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. I'd said no to their crazy plan, and the world hadn't ended. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. It was Mom. I didn't answer. Then Dad called. Then Jake. Then Sarah. I ignored all of them and got ready for work like nothing had happened. By lunchtime, I had 12 missed calls and about 20 text messages. I finally read them while eating my sandwich in the break room at work. "Camilla, we need to talk." "You're being unreasonable," that was from Mom. "Your brother needs your help." "Family comes first," from Dad. "Sarah cried all night because of what you said." "You're hurting a pregnant woman," from Jake. "I thought you loved me like a sister." "I guess I was wrong," from Sarah herself. I deleted every single message without responding. They wanted me to feel guilty, but I wasn't going to play their game anymore. The calls kept coming for the next 3 days. Every time my phone rang, it was one of them trying to wear me down. They left voicemails too, each one more dramatic than the last. "Camilla, this is your mother, you're destroying this family with your selfishness." "Camilla, it's Dad, I'm disappointed in you. This isn't how we raised you." "Camilla, it's Jake, Sarah's health is suffering because of the stress you're causing. If something happens to the baby, it's on you." That last one really pissed me off. Now they were trying to blame me for Sarah's pregnancy complications? As if my refusal to give up my house could somehow cause a miscarriage. It was ridiculous and manipulative. I showed the messages to my friend Lisa at work. She's been my colleague for 8 years, and she knows my family situation pretty well. "Are they serious?" she asked, reading Jake's text about the baby. "They're actually trying to guilt trip you with that?" "Apparently," I said, "according to them, I'm single-handedly destroying a pregnancy by not giving up my house." "That's insane," Lisa said, "you know that, right? None of this is your fault." "I know," I said, but it felt good to hear someone else say it. They just want me to feel bad enough to cave. "Don't you dare," Lisa said firmly, "you worked your ass off for that house. They have no right to it." The text messages got more creative as the week went on. They started sending me articles about family loyalty and the importance of helping relatives. Mom sent me a Bible verse about loving your neighbor. Dad sent me a story about a woman who gave up her house to help her sister. "This could be you," he wrote under the article. You could be the hero of this story." I laughed out loud when I read that. Hero? They wanted me to be a hero by giving up everything I'd worked for? That wasn't heroic, that was stupid. Sarah's messages were the worst. She sent me ultrasound photos with captions like "Your nephew needs a room" and "Don't you want him to have a good life?" She even sent me a picture of their cramped studio with the caption, "Is this really where you want your family to live?" I wanted to text back and remind her that she was living there for free, but I didn't. Engaging with any of their messages would just encourage them to keep going. By the end of the week, the calls and texts finally started slowing down. I thought maybe they'd given up and accepted my decision. I should have known better. That Friday, I went to work as usual, but around noon I started feeling sick. I had a fever and a headache, and I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and needed to go home early. Around 2 in the afternoon, I left the office and drove home. I pulled into my driveway and immediately noticed something was wrong. There was a big moving truck parked in front of my house with "Murphy's Moving Service" painted on the side. My parents' car was there too, parked right behind the truck. My heart started racing. What the hell was going on? I used my key to get into my own house, and I couldn't believe what I saw. My parents were inside, packing up my stuff. Mom was wrapping my dishes in newspaper, and Dad was taking books off my shelves and putting them in boxes. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted. They both jumped like they'd been caught stealing, which I guess they had been. "Oh, Camilla," Mom said, trying to sound casual, "we thought you were at work." "I asked you a question," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you doing in my house?" "We're helping you move," Mom said like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Jake and Sarah are moving in here, and you're moving to their studio apartment." "I told you I wasn't doing that," I said, my voice getting louder. "I told you a dozen times." "We all decided you don't need this much space," Dad said, not even looking up from the books he was packing. "It's not fair for you to have all this room when they're about to have a baby." "I don't care what you decided," I said, "this is my house." They just kept packing like I wasn't even there. Mom folded one of my sweaters and put it in a box. Dad wrapped up a picture frame and added it to his pile. "Stop," I said, "stop packing my things right now." "Camilla, don't make this harder than it needs to be," Mom said. That's when I lost it. I went upstairs to my bedroom and called the police. "I need to report a break-in," I told the dispatcher. "People broke into my house and they're packing up my belongings." "Are you in immediate danger?" she asked. "No, but they're stealing my stuff and they won't leave." "We'll send someone right away." The police showed up 5 minutes later. 2 officers came to the door, and I explained the situation. My parents tried to act like this was all a misunderstanding. "Officer, this is our daughter," Dad said, "we're just helping her move." "Did she ask for your help?" the first officer asked. "Well, no, but..." "Ma'am," the officer said to me, "did you give them permission to be in your house?" "Absolutely not," I said. "I told them repeatedly that I'm not moving anywhere." The officers looked at each other, then at my parents. "Sir, ma'am, you need to come with us." "This is ridiculous," Mom shouted, "she's our daughter." "That doesn't give you the right to enter her home without permission," the second officer said. Mom started screaming, and Dad swung at the officers. They arrested my parents right there in my living room. I watched them led away while the moving truck guys stood around looking confused. "What about our stuff?" one of the movers asked. "Put everything back where you found it," I said. "And send the bill to whoever hired you." After everyone left, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what had just happened. My own parents had broken into my house and tried to force me to move. They actually thought they could just decide what was best for me and make it happen. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Mom, calling from the police station. "Camilla, you need to drop these charges," she said. "We're your parents, we were just trying to help." "No," I said, "I'm done with all of you." "You can't be serious," she said. "I'm completely serious," I said, and hung up. The next morning, I went to the police station and decided not to drop the charges. My parents could deal with the consequences of their actions. I was done being their doormat. My parents made bail that evening and got out of jail. I wasn't surprised, they had money and no criminal record. What did surprise me was that they didn't call me right away. I thought they'd be furious and want to yell at me some more. Instead, I got a call from my grandmother the next morning. She sounded tired and stressed. "Camilla, your parents are very upset," she said. "They can't believe you actually had them arrested." "They broke into my house, Grandma," I said. "They were packing up my belongings without my permission." I know, she said, "and I told them you were right to keep your house. But calling the police on your own parents? That's serious business." What was I supposed to do? Ask them nicely to stop stealing my stuff? "I don't know," she admitted, "this whole situation is a mess. But you can't let this destroy your family." "I didn't destroy anything," I said, "they did this to themselves." Grandma sighed, "Maybe you're right. But they're still your parents." "Are they?" I asked, "because parents are supposed to love and support their children. These people just want to use me." After I hung up with Grandma, I didn't hear from anyone for 3 days. The silence was actually nice. No angry calls, no guilt-tripping texts, no demands for my house. Just peace and quiet. But then I got a letter in the mail. It was from my mother, written in her careful handwriting on her fancy stationery. "Camilla," it said, "after much thought and discussion with your father and brother, we have decided to disown you. You are no longer our daughter. Your selfish actions have shown us that you care nothing for your family. You chose a house over your own flesh and blood. We will not be contacting you again, and we do not want you to contact us." It was signed "Former Mother" instead of "Love, Mom." I read the letter twice, then put it down on my kitchen table. I waited to feel sad or hurt or angry. But instead, I felt relieved, actually relieved. They thought this letter would devastate me. They probably imagined me crying and begging them to take me back. But all I felt was freedom. I was finally free from their constant criticism, their endless demands, their manipulation. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat in my living room, looking around at my beautiful house. My house that I'd worked 13 years to afford. My house that I'd almost lost to their greed and entitlement. The next few weeks were the most peaceful I'd had in years. I went to work, came home to my quiet house, and did whatever I wanted. I didn't have to worry about Sunday dinners or family drama or anyone telling me I was selfish for living my own life. I heard through the grapevine that Jake and Sarah were still living in the studio apartment. My grandmother mentioned it during one of our phone calls. "They're managing," she said, "the baby's due in a few months, and they're getting by." "What about my parents?" I asked. "They're thinking about selling their house and the studio apartment," Grandma said. "They want to use the money to buy 2 places, one for themselves and one for Jake and Sarah." "They could have done that from the beginning," I said, "instead of trying to steal my house." "I think they just wanted to take advantage of you," Grandma said quietly. "They didn't think you'd fight back." Well, they were wrong. I found out later that my parents had been talking about this plan for months. They'd convinced themselves that I didn't deserve my house because I was single and didn't have kids. They figured I'd be too nice to refuse them, too desperate to keep the family together. They were wrong on both counts. The funny thing is, they could have asked me to help them buy Jake and Sarah a house. If they'd approached me like reasonable people, explained their situation, and asked for a loan or a gift, I might have considered it. I've always been generous with my family. But they didn't want to ask for help. They wanted to take what they thought I didn't deserve. They wanted to punish me for being successful and independent. 6 months later, I heard that they'd actually gone through with their plan. They sold both properties and bought 2 smaller places. Jake and Sarah got a 2-bedroom apartment, and my parents got a condo. Everyone was happy with their new living situations. I was happy too. I still lived in my beautiful house, the one I'd worked so hard for. I still had my job and my independence. And I didn't have to deal with people who thought I owed them everything I'd earned. Sometimes I miss having a family. I miss the idea of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. But I don't miss the constant criticism, the manipulation, the feeling that nothing I did was ever good enough. My life is quiet now, but it's mine. I make my own decisions, spend my own money, and live in my own house. Nobody tells me I'm selfish for being successful. Nobody demands that I give up my hard-earned possessions to people who haven't worked for them. I've learned something important through all this: sometimes the people who claim to love you are actually the ones holding you back. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. My family thought they were teaching me a lesson by disowning me. They thought I'd come crawling back, begging for forgiveness and offering to give up my house. Instead, they taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. They taught me that I don't need their approval to be happy. They taught me that choosing myself isn't selfish, it's necessary.